Hey, my name is Beau. I am a musician and music teacher, and today I want to talk about an interesting topic that I usually eventually get to with most of my students. But what do you do in the situation where you love music? I mean, if you're watching this, you're probably a musician or a music teacher or some combination of all that, and you probably have musical projects and musical goals or just things you're interested in and that things you want to learn. But sometimes what happens is our motivation doesn't align with our desires. So, for example, I usually practice in the morning before I go to work for like an hour, maybe half an hour to an hour, depending on the day. And I usually have a plan. So I usually have, certain projects I'm trying to complete and things that I need to be practicing at certain doses every day so I can kind of move forward on those projects. But sometimes I don't feel like it. Sometimes I'm super fired up, super enthusiastic. And that's wonderful. I wake up, bang, let's go. It's time to practice. And that's wonderful. We all want that. I mean, and if you have a way to do that in a healthy way, then that's great. I mean, if you watch the channel, the video on my channel about how to increase your intrinsic motivation as a musician, those are really good strategies to look at. I recommend you go watch that video. But the fact of the matter is that sometimes you're gonna go to the practice room or it's time to practice and you're not going to want to do it. And the question is, what are you going to do in that situation? A lot of people who are struggling with procrastination, who are struggling with maybe some discipline problems, they'll just kind of throw in the towel and say, well, I don't feel like it, or I'm having these thoughts like I could do it later. And they kind of follow those thoughts. And there's nothing wrong with that, doing that once in a while. I'm not advocating like super hustle culture. You have to be disciplined all the time, or you're not worthy of it as a human being or as a musician. I'm not talking about that at all. So there's definitely a place for relaxation. There's definitely a place for enjoying yourself at your instrument. But there's also a place for having some amount of work ethic or discipline. And if you have projects that are big and important to you, you're probably going to have to put some effort into those projects when you don't feel particularly emotionally aligned. And that's just reality, right? And so the question is, how do you do this in a way that's healthy? And how do you do this in a way that's sustainable? And so the perspectives I'm going to share were really influenced in terms of how I learned about them from acceptance and commitment therapy and from metacognitive therapy. So acceptance and commitment therapy, it was developed by Stephen Hayes in the States. He's out of Nevada, and metacognitive therapy was developed by Adrian Wells out of the UK. And both genius psychologists. They look at things in very similar ways, but there are some differences between the two. But the techniques they recommend for dealing with this kind of thing are remarkably similar, and they have nothing to do with changing your thoughts. And so I think what happens is a lot of people in this situation where you want to be practicing, but at 6 a.m. when it's time to practice, you don't want to practice. And so if you look at kind of first and second wave psychology, so kind of like Freudian psychology, I'm painting with a broad brush. I'm sure many people won't be happy with how I'm about to say this, but if you look at Freudian psychology, they'll usually try to go into your past and figure out like the deep-seated issues, or they're going to go into content. If it's not your past, they're going to try to figure out like the deep subconscious regions. And many kind of psychodynamic psychologists will want to look into the past, which is fine, but they may look into the present. Your deep-seated subconscious reasons for not wanting to practice. Second wave psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy that came from Albert Ellis and Aaron Beck, they're going to get into things like you need to restructure your thinking. So if you don't want to practice in the morning, it's because you're having some kind of negative thought or unhelpful thought, and you need to reprogram that thought, and that'll change your emotion. And when you do all that, you'll want to practice and everything's going to be great. And that's fine. Some of those techniques work. I mean, sometimes you do need to reframe things or look at things differently, like, wow, I have the opportunity to practice. I have a practice room with resources and a functioning nervous system that can learn, and the time and the money and the energy and all that kind of stuff. Or you could look at things differently. You could say, you know what, I really value this project and I should be motivated. And you try to basically restructure your thinking. That's the hallmark of that approach. You're restructuring the thoughts you have in hope that that's going to change your emotions or change your behavior. Now, the third wave therapy is look at things a little differently. They are not really worried with the content of your thoughts. They're much more worried about how you respond to them. So they tend to align much more with kind of mindfulness practices or Eastern meditation practices, Buddhism and stuff like that. But ACT and metacognitive therapy are not, Buddhist practices by any means, but they just encourage you to look at thoughts differently. And acceptance and commitment therapy specifically, it talks about how instead of thinking about your thoughts as things that need to be restructured or changed or are false or true, it just has you look at your thoughts. Are they useful for the things that you value? And so if we take my case, I want to be a good classical guitarist, maybe a great classical guitarist, and a great jazz musician. Those are kind of my bigger picture aspirations. Now, when I wake up at 6 a.m. and I don't feel like practicing, and I have thoughts like, I'd rather listen to this audiobook, or I'll do that later, I can practice when I get home. And I have emotions that are also kind of giving me the same message, but more at a gut visceral level, like I do not feel like doing this right now. The question I can ask myself is, are those tools, if you think of thoughts and emotions as tools, are those tools actually helping me go after what I value right now? And again, I'm not advocating getting caught up into some kind of like pseudo-discipline, heroic hustle thing where you have to like practice 16 hours a day to be a good musician and to prove to yourself and to everyone. I mean, that, as far as I consider, that's all crap, and you should just stay away from that. But we do need some kind of work ethic, because we're not always going to feel emotionally aligned to do the things that we deep down want to do. And this is where, some kind of emotional maturity comes into play, and emotional mindfulness. You need to be mindful, like, I'm not going to force myself to get up at 5 a.m. every day and play the bagpipes before I play classical guitar for an hour, because I don't care about the bagpipes. I don't care about being that kind of musician. I don't care about having those kinds of skills. But I have decided that I value, pursuing some kind of guitar education, right? And jazz education, classical guitar music and jazz. That's basically what I'm working on. So I have decided I value those things. So that being said, that I value those things, when I wake up at 6 and I decide, am I going to practice or not right now? The thoughts and emotions I'm having are essentially tools to help me live life better. And so you don't want to suppress your emotions. I mean, if every day I hate my practice sessions, maybe I should be looking at, well, what am I doing in my practice sessions? Am I giving myself any time to have fun? Do I even like the stuff I'm working on? You have to be you have to have some emotional perspective. And so if there's a problem 365 days of the year, then you might have a bigger thing you need to sort out. You need to sort out what your values are, or you need to sort some other things out. But I'm talking about, like, if 30% of the time I just don't feel like doing it, but there are things that I value. I mean, I'm not a fan of just kind of not pursuing my goals just because in that moment I'm not emotionally aligned. And this is really quite a change in perspective, because I find that a lot of people that have, there are a lot of people that they have no idea what's going on with their emotions. There's a lot of suppression, a lot of denial of emotions. They just try to positively steamroll, and I don't know how healthy that is. But then on the other end of the spectrum, a lot of people, I think they read too much into their emotions. So a good way to think about this is, if you're at a Lego store with a 5-year-old, let's say you take your 5-year-old niece or nephew out to the Lego store, they see a $900 Lord of the Rings Lego set, and they're like, oh, can we get it? And you're like, no, we're not getting that. They freak out. They throw the tantrum. They're screaming. There's a lot of intense emotion there. There's a lot of aversion. There's a lot of frustration. The question is, how do you respond to that? And most people respond to that in a certain way, in a healthy way, because they have emotional perspective. There's an emotional maturity. This is just a passing feeling. We don't need to give into this. We don't need to buy, Timmy a $900 Barradoom Lego set. It's just not necessary. It's silly. This is going to pass, right? But when we think of ourselves as adults that are having emotions, and I wake up at 6 a.m. and I'm like, oh, I don't feel like doing this right now. I wish I could do something else. You need to have some emotional perspective, right? And I think often people just take their emotions too seriously. And so this is where the strategy comes into play. How do you respond to your emotions? And so a very unskillful thing to do is to try to get in a battle with your emotions. And Stephen Hayes, who created, at least was one of the creators, but one of the central creators of acceptance and commitment therapy, he talks about how the way the mind functions is particularly peculiar if you think about it. If you've ever seen Harry Potter, in the last movie or two, where they bust into Bellatrix's vault, and there's a spell on the gold items in the vault, and every time they touch something, it multiplies, right? They touch something, it multiplies. This is actually how the brain works. So if I say, don't think of a pink elephant, you are essentially screwed for the next minute. There is no way you're going to actively suppress that. And for the small percentage of people that do somehow succeed with that task, they have a kind of an explosion of pink elephant thoughts, almost like they pushed a beach ball down under the water and they held it there with some force, and then bam, as soon as they let it go, they get a rebound effect where it's hyper pronounced. And so this can happen if you try to suppress thoughts and emotions. Like if I try to wake up and I think, oh, I don't want to feel that feeling, I don't want to practice, like get out of here, or I don't want to think that thought, like I'd rather be doing something else, I'm going to push that out of here, I'm going to get it out of my head by thinking positively. We're doing the pink elephant thing. And the mind basically is very good at multiplying things and creating associations. The mind is not good at deleting things. I mean, so the way that mechanism works is essentially the reason that people can get intrusive thoughts, or they can get traumatic experiences. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not going to go into all that. I'm just someone who's very passionate about reading psychology. But basically, the mind is very good at adding things and not good at taking things away. And so this has a lot of implications for how you handle these kinds of thoughts and emotions when you're trying to just show up in the practice room and get something done. The strategy is essentially to be mindful of these things, but not get into a battle with them, not push them away. And I think this kind of feels like a shit sandwich sometimes when you pitch this to somebody, because what they really want is to feel better. You know, everyone wants to feel better. We want to be fired up. We don't want to feel demotivated to practice. But if you don't have a way to dependably produce super positive emotion right now and feel motivated, it's not really worth your time to get into a battle with these feelings. You'll get hooked by them, you'll get fused with them, and you're not really going to end up pursuing what you value anyway. And this is what acceptance and commitment therapy talks about. So what's a lot more effective is to acknowledge the thoughts and feelings that you're having, and then redirect your attention towards what you value and take action on what you value. And again, people don't like this. You give them the sales pitch, they say, but I really just don't feel like doing it. And if I felt like doing it, then everything would work out fine. And this is a whole learning process. I'm not saying from watching this video, you're going to figure this out. But what you can start to learn if you run these experiments is you can do things that you don't feel like doing. You can actually be struggling with a challenging experience and take action. I mean, a good example of this is like one day I was experiencing some physical pain that was quite pronounced and intense. I mean, I think I had a flu at the time and there was some other physical stuff going on. And I still wanted to do some mental practice on what I was working on. And, you know, I'm not saying again that you have to be like super hard on yourself or whatever, but I realized like, you know, I'm spending the whole day at home alone sick. Basically what I could do is I could do 5 minutes of practice every hour mentally in my head. That doesn't feel too extreme. I mean, I am a maniac in general. So, I mean, that is kind of crazy to do it. I get it, like that regimented, but it's not really a lot of time spent. It's not going to consume a lot of energy. But the thing is, this terrible physical sensation, it kind of hijacks your attention. It fuses with you. You get super fixated on it. And basically a more constructive strategy would be like, is this tool right now helping me take action on what I want to do? Tools meaning thoughts and emotions. And so I recommend you experiment with this. Next time you feel like not practicing, acknowledge the feeling you're having, acknowledge the thought and the feeling, and notice if there's an inclination to want to get rid of it. Usually if it's a painful experience, we do want to get rid of it. This is kind of how this works. We know if we were to force ourselves to practice, that feeling of aversion is going to stay there or maybe even rise. But if we do something else, like go on our phone or God knows what you like to do, play Super Smash Brothers, that feeling of aversion would evaporate. And so we want to feel better. And I feel for you. There's nothing wrong with wanting to feel better. But the question is that short-range hedonistic strategy actually helping you? I mean, there's nothing wrong with playing video games or doing whatever you want to do, but is that strategy helping you live the life you want to live as a musician? And so what you can start to do is you can get into this habit of it's like acknowledging the emotion, maybe giving it a label if you want to, that can help people. And then thinking, is this useful? Not is this true? Don't go down the path of is this true? The path of is this true, it'll lead into a lot of rumination, which is pretty much better just done as a contemplative exercise. But if you wake up in the morning and I have thoughts like, I don't want to practice right now, and then I start thinking, is it true? I don't want to practice. Why don't I want to practice? Maybe I'm not meant to be a musician. Maybe I should pick up, some other thing that interests me because that thing will be more intrinsically motivating. You see how the rumination starts. So there's nothing wrong with going for a quiet walk and pausing and journaling and talking to your friends about what you want to do, exploring what your values are. But, on the fly in your life, that's not a good time to do that. And the thing for me is, I know I value music. I really want to be a good classical guitarist. I really want to be a good jazz guitarist. It's just sometimes my emotions don't always align with it. And you don't need to read into that. You don't need to make it some commentary on your identity and who you are. But my friends are so disciplined. Like my friend at music school is playing for 9 hours a day and I can't even play for 2 hours a day. Like, how am I going to have a career? The rumination just gets out of hand. So what I would recommend doing is acknowledge the thought. Don't worry about getting rid of it. Don't get into a battle with it. Change your goal from feeling better to acting on what you value. And in the long run, you will feel better. And so Albert Ellis, a wonderful psychologist who passed away a little while ago, he had this great kind of framework. You want to be a long-range hedonist, not a short-range hedonist. And so short-range hedonism tends to lead to a lot of short-term gratification. I'm going to eat pizza pops and ice cream and play Super Smash Brothers, and I'm not going to work on anything like a long-term goal. So again, I'm not against any kind of short-range pleasure, but when you're a long-range hedonist, what you do is you enjoy little pleasures of life, but you also realize that there are bigger pleasures in life that come from long-range goals, long-range relationship development, long-range project execution, long-range learning projects. There's a different kind of satisfaction that comes from this long-range hedonism, and it's really just about balancing the two of these. And so again, the process is acknowledge the challenging thought or emotion that you're experiencing, reflect on whether that thought or emotion is helping you. Is it useful? Not is it true, but is it useful? Choose to reorient your attention towards what you value instead of fixating on feeling better this moment, and then take action. I mean, that's really acceptance and commitment therapy in a nutshell. It's wonderful. You should read about it. You should learn about it. Metacognitive therapy is also wonderful. But the point is to kind of tone down the fusion with thoughts and emotions. Don't take them overly seriously all the time. We're not talking about suppressing things, but think about what you care about and move in that direction. And so, it's this is more of a psychology-based video, but I really think this is important. If you're trying to be a professional musician or a serious hobby musician, these are the kind of things that can stop you from putting the time in to doing something that you actually know you want to do. We can just kind of get tripped up with getting fused with thoughts and taking our thoughts too seriously, rather than having some emotional maturity, holding them in context. And so I'll sign off there, but again, my name is Beau. I offer online guitar and online piano lessons. I also offer online coaching. So the coaching usually takes the form of helping people take action on their projects, helping people develop better organizational systems and execution systems for their projects, and then also just developing better strategies for dealing with challenging emotions, better strategies for just getting yourself to practice in a healthy way, in a healthy and a sustainable way. Because you can berate yourself and practice a lot for 1 week, but it's not going to be sustainable. It's not going to be enjoyable over the long range time. So you gotta learn how to do this in a positive and healthy way. And sometimes just having someone to check in once a week with for a couple months, it can really just push you in the right direction. I've done coaching before, and I think it was some of the best time and money I spent. So if that's something you're interested in, shoot me an email or leave a comment on this video. Thanks so much for tuning in, though. Have a wonderful day.